Okay, well, we are going to go ahead and get started today. Thank you all for joining us for our last 2022 program series in our Living Well Wednesdays. My name is Erin Tynan, and I am the fax agent in Pottawatomie County, and I will be your host for today. Our Living Well Wednesday is a virtual learning series hosted by K-State Research and Extension, family and consumer science professionals from across the state. Many of our topics will touch on a wide variety of essential skills that will empower you and your family to live, work, and thrive. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping rules. Be respectful and open to others throughout the presentation. Feel free to type your questions in the chat box, the Q&A box, or as well as any comments. The Q&A box does have a feature where you can ask an anonymous question if you're more comfortable with that. Our chat monitors are Myrna, Sherilyn, and Cassidy, and they will make sure to go over all the questions at the end of the presentation. Today's session will be recorded and posted to our Living Well Wednesday webpage along with additional resources. You will be able to find all future and past programs on that website as well. And it's at KSRE Living Well Webinars. We want to acknowledge that KSRE is an equal opportunity employer. Therefore, we do not discriminate against anyone. So if there is a special request or concern that you need to allow for you to attend our programs, please reach out to us. We want to thank our presenters for joining us today. Barbara Stockebrand is a family consumer science agent in the Southwind Extension District, and Janae McNally is an adult development and aging agent in the Frontier Extension District. And with that, I will turn it over to these ladies so we can begin our presentation.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Barbara and I are glad you joined us today. We thought we'd kind of kick off this presentation with a poll question that reads, I know someone who has been a victim of identity theft, or I have become a victim of identity theft myself. If you want to take a few moments and answer that question, we'll kind of see where everyone's at.
We have responses flying in. We're about 87% of people who have responded. We'll give it a couple more seconds. So if you haven't responded to the poll question, go ahead. And then we will share the results. Okay, looks like most everyone has responded. So I'm going to go ahead and end and share our results with everyone.
Wow. It looks like the majority of us have been affected or we know someone that has been affected, which we'll kind of talk about the number that's being affected here later on in the presentation. But hopefully if you haven't been, you'll learn some tips and trades of what really can happen and what to kind of look for as we go throughout the presentation. Next slide. In 2020, there were 1.4 million reports of identity theft, doubling that of the number of 2019, amounting to $15.1 billion in monetary losses. And up until the last 2 to 3 years, most complaints from the FTC came as a result of identity theft. We'll talk a little bit later on about the number one complaint is today. Actually, if you want to go back a slide. Sorry about that. According to the Federal Trade Commission, the upsurge in identity theft reports in 2020 was largely due to complaints related to COVID-19 stimulus monies and unfortunately, false unemployment claims. As you can see from the statistics on this slide, it's easy to understand how scams and ID theft attempts are going on right in our own communities, even as we speak. We'd all like to think we would never become a victim, but most of us had, even in that poll question. However, their crafty tactics used in different types of solicitations can easily catch any of us off guard. We will be sharing some tools today and information so we can all learn more clearly how to recognize the general commonalities that go along with identity theft and scams. Next slide. So how would you describe identity theft to someone who didn't realize what it was? Is it someone who's pretending to be you, or someone who is wanting to steal your personal information so that they can access personal information, your accounts, your credit cards, your identification numbers, and identification numbers that are specific to you? Next slide. First, we need to understand what personal information looks like. Personal information is defined as any information that can be related to an identifiable person. Some of the common types of personal information include names, email addresses, telephone numbers, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, personal signatures, photographs that we have, credit information. While the last three on the list are considered more sensitive information, other types of sensitive information include maybe your employee records, health records, or receipts of governmental services. So now we can maybe hopefully start to understand how the regular activities of our daily lives can lead to our vulnerabilities that we have with the transactions that we do. Next slide, please. So here are a few examples of how personal information can be used in forms of identity theft. Remember, these people are trying to be you. Someone is using your personal information without your knowledge or permission. Maybe a bill is charged to your credit card unknowingly to you. Maybe you have an expense for medical procedure could be billed to you using your medical or Medicare card number. Or tax returns, everyone's doing taxes this time of year, could be filed in your name and against your social security number. So keep those things in mind. Next slide. I have another poll question that we wanted to use, which is a two-part question. The first one reads, I check my financial account and bill statements when they come. That helps reduce my risk of identity theft. And the second one is, I receive a notice from the Internal Revenue Services out of the blue. I called the number on the notice to get the details. If you want to take a few minutes to answer both of those questions, we'll see what those results look like.
We're at about 50%, so we'll give it a little bit more time.
I know these are kind of tricky questions.
Still have some coming in, so we'll give it a few more seconds. We're about 85% participation. So if you haven't answered yet and want to participate, go ahead and do it now. All right, that is about everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and end our poll.
Thanks, Rachel.
And here are our results.
Very good, you guys. Okay, so the first question was, I check my financial accounts and bill statements when they come to help reduce the risk of identity theft. That one is true. Missing or late statements can be a sign of identity theft. Quickly catching those transactions that were not created on your part can help in reporting the process and speed that up, and even clearing up the identity theft incidences. So I know that's hard to do, but maybe when they first come in, we should all try to do that. The second one is true as well. This one's a little trickier for some. The IRS only notifies of issues through the mail, never by phone or email. So if the IRS sends you a notice indicating a problem, or if you think something has been misused, someone has misused your social security number, make sure to get a job or tax refund, maybe contact them by the number listed on the notice that you received in the mail. So again, both of those questions were true. So great job to everyone listening and participating. Next slide. So what are some red flags that indicate we may have fallen victim to identity theft? As we've learned in the previous poll questions, we should regularly review our monthly statements for transactions that are strange to us or maybe that we don't recognize. Maybe we receive bills for statements that we didn't purchase. If you should stop receiving bills you expect, such as maybe your utility bills, maybe that's an indication that someone has used your identity and made an address change in your name. You'll also want to make sure you review medical benefit statements, making sure they coincide with activities related to your health care. So again, that's a lot to take in, but those are just some easy ways to maybe how to spot identity theft. Next slide. A great place to begin is to check your credit, and check your credit. Again, there's a reason I repeat these phrases 3 different times. There are 3 credit reporting companies: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. All 3 of these collect and share the financial information on individuals. These are the companies, lenders, insurance companies, and stores offering credit to research in order to learn if someone's a good credit risk. You have to access your records with these 3 companies too. Normally, you are allowed to request 1 free credit report per year per company. It's actually recommended, and we alternate between the 3 companies at different intervals over the year for a free report from each company. However, since COVID began, we are all able to obtain a free credit report weekly if we wish from those companies. So you may have to answer some questions that are usually related to past business associations or residences, maybe where you've lived. And that's to make sure that you are who you say you are before receiving access to your credit report. The report itself will list current and past addresses, mortgages, loans, store credit cards, and utility bills. You know, it tells the financial accounts if you're in good standing. For example, do you pay your bill on time? It's a good way to check financial activity that is happening in your name. You may want to make sure it is financial activity that you have actually created. Kind of as a side note, it's on children. You know, sometimes we might overlook the children, but minors have their identity stolen actually quite frequently. After all, we are all given a social security number when we are born. So they are likely to have an activity really on their credit report until later in their teens. But you might, if you have a kid that you know, maybe keep an eye on letters or from collection agencies or bills from unpaid balances in their names. And to be safe, you can always request a credit report from companies around the time they reach maybe 15. This gives up some time to clear up records of identity theft if it's taken place before they might be applying for college loans, jobs, or credit cards. And I think we have some resources to maybe post in the chat at this time. One of them is the annual creditreport.com, and there's a phone number as well. So I think that will be up in the chat. Next slide. So a great place to begin is to check. Sorry about that. So some steps that you can go to protect your personal identity include maybe properly disposing of paper trails that contain personal information through burning or shredding. Make sure you pick up your mail as soon as it's delivered or as soon as possible. You may want to mail items that list personal accounts directly to the post office and maybe not to your mailbox in case those are stolen. If someone contacts you and ends up asking for any personal information over the phone, do not give it to them. And if you're doing business online, use a strong password with your accounts. Always remember to do that. Next slide. If identity theft does happen, it's important to take quick action. So depending on what has been compromised will determine who you contact. For example, contact your credit card company if your card has been lost or compromised. Contact your bank if your bank account is showing strange transactions. report the identity theft to one of those 3 credit reporting companies that I spoke about earlier. Those companies will share your theft report with the other 2 companies, so you don't have to call all 3. And then always remember to file an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. And also consider a fraud alert or freezing your credit. You may be asking, well, what's the difference between the 2? Well, a fraud alert informs creditors that you have been a victim to fraud. It requires creditors to identify with you before opening a new account or changing existing credit limits by contacting you by a phone number that you have provided, making sure it's you. A general fraud alert lasts for 1 year. Fraud alerts are free, and if victims of identity theft can get an extended fraud alert that actually lasts for 7 years. So then a credit freeze or security freeze prevents credit, loans, and services from being opened in your name without permission. You can place a credit freeze on your credit card file for free, and you can place a freeze on your children's reports who are under the age of 16. A credit freeze requires contacting each of the 3 companies, reporting those companies. Again, it's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion individually. The freeze stays in place until you unfreeze them. But keep in mind, in order to open a loan or a credit card account, you will need to lift that freeze on your credit account with each of the 3 reporting companies. And again, I think we have some additional information down in the chat from identitytheft.gov, as well as you may want to type it in again, consumer reporting companies, and we will have those there in the chat as well. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And I am going to turn it over to Barbara at this time, or see if we have any questions up until this point.
Janae, we do have one question in the Q&A box, and it says, can the notice from the IRS not be authentic and the number in the letter not be the IRS?
That's a great question. To our knowledge, they only contact you via mail. But again, when you call into that number, you can, they should list that number. And if it doesn't go to the IRS, then it would be a fraud. But if they answer the phone, yes, this is the IRS, then I think you should be okay. But it's always best to be safe. But yeah, remember, they'll only, at this time that we know of, only contact you by mail.
Okay, Janae, thank you for that lead in with the identity theft information. So we're going to move on to scams and fraud a little more now. So through Janae's portion, we've learned that identity theft is represented by someone who is pretending to be you. Scams are similar, but a little different. Those that scam know and research their targets and focus on their victims for particular purposes, and they know what regions of the United States or wherever they are calling. And unfortunately, older adults are, as a whole, are a particularly favorite target. They're more likely to listen and take the time to do that. They are often more trusting, especially in the Midwest, and they're more easily caught off guard. And one of the most attractive features of our older adults is that they are likely to have those assets that they're after, because that is what motivates the scammers, is that some kind of financial gain that they could possibly gain from the scam. So scams boils down basically to someone who is pretending to be someone else. Scams are also one of the least reported of the avenues used to exploit individuals as far as being reported, mostly due to those efforts against the older adults. We know anyone who would fall victim to a scam would be embarrassed about it and probably wouldn't want to talk about it much. But however, for older adults, there are other implications. They fear they will be seen as not being able to handle their financial and banking processes anymore, possibly with a potential loss of control and independence. Fear that their actions may isolate them even more from family or even their familiar environments, and maybe even fear that they may be placed in a nursing home. Aging, can include the natural slowing of information processing, dementia, hearing loss, and other health issues, making older adults prime victims for scams. And they may forget details needed as evidence in order to prosecute a scam. So rather than lose control over their affairs, older adults may hide this type of abuse. And because of these factors, then the predators are counting on that, and they're counting on those older adults to remain silent. Some of the common scams include someone calling from Social Security, needing your personal or information or confirming that, or the IRS with threats of arrest, possibly if outstanding taxes aren't paid really soon. And as Janae mentioned, the IRS will only contact you through the mail. Someone could call and state your computer is about to crash and they can fix it for you right away. There may be a call or an email, probably a call. A friend or a grandchild is in trouble and in need of money immediately. Vehicle warranties that are about to expire. Possibly an investment scam where money can be made quickly and easily by investing. And it may involve an asset such as gold that has a limited availability for a limited time. And some of those are even endorsed by celebrities. And then COVID-19 has opened a new playing field for scammers through the stimulus funds that were available early on, and also through the testing kits that came out a little later. TransUnion, one of those credit reporting companies that Janae referred to, reported that in the first 4 months of 2021, digital fraud attempts were up 25% over the last 4 months of 2020. Digital fraud is defined as being any online scam or fraudulent transaction. So just kind of know that. Next slide, please. So scams are often referred to as imposter scams because those that make the contact are not who they say they are. Scammers are masters of persuasion. They say whatever they can to gain your trust. They keep the pressure on to get to your resources, and they refuse to take no for an answer. So we've already identified the fact that scams are often geared to certain groups of people for who they are, such as older adults who may have Social Security or Medicare benefits, individuals possibly with student loans, or those who own a vehicle. But we're also learning that scammers gear their strategies also to how we are. Older adults are sometimes lonely and often want to connect with others, so a friendly conversation over the phone may be very inviting to them, even if it's someone they don't know. Scammers often prey also on those who are vulnerable emotionally. They feed on either the positive or the negative emotional reactions to their calls to persuade you to move in their direction. And they may even be aware of your particular vulnerability. For example, having lost a loved one and being named as a survivor in an obituary, or maybe a post on social media for a loss of a loved one. Scam artists also know that when people get scared, they often don't think straight. So they paint frightening global scenarios in their sales pitches to promote their product. And this was a common theme during the pandemic. Next slide, please. Some scams are types of phishing. And while it's spelled differently than the type of phishing we might do in our lake or our local pond, it's a similar tactic. The goal is to catch someone off guard and get the information or the resources that they want. The approach may come to you in the form of an email or by phone, even a knock on the door, but the email and phone are the easier ones for them. If it's a contact coming to you out of the blue, be wary that it is a scam. It may include bad grammar or incorrect spelling, which is a good sign. It may be coming from another country. And often the inquiry begins very general. It's not personal at all. They may present themselves as a representative from an official entity, and they may even illegally use the logo of an existing company to look even more official and to reroute funds that they may acquire through their scam. And it must be kept a secret. So in the process of this scam, it will likely require money or fees. So the request will usually be paid for with a wire transfer, gift card, or a reloadable debit card. So if these forms are required, you just need to know that it's a quick transaction, it's likely not traceable, and the money is gone. Next slide, please. So what can we do to help protect ourselves? If we're contacted by phone, just hang up. Don't even reply. If by email, you have time to think and not respond. So while you are thinking, ask a family member or a friend what they think. Do some research on the company or the topic they are promoting if you happen to be a little bit intrigued. If they are wanting a reply to an email, look to see if the reply comes to or is returned to a personal email address, such as Gmail or Hotmail. If so, it's probably a scam. Sometimes in an email, there's a link included for you to click on, requesting you to go to their site. So use your cursor to hover over the link, but don't click on the link. If it sounds like something you are interested in, then use a different browser through the internet to access the company website. And that is if there is one. But whatever you do, don't click on the link contained on the email. And then often the emails will also maybe have attachments that they hope that you'll click on or request that you click on. Don't click on those either, because those can install software where the scammer may be able to gain access to your computer and then maybe through your computer to other possible computers of friends and family. And the last thing is just never send money. Next slide, please. We all want to support those charities that are important to us. However, if we are contacted by someone representing a charitable cause, we need to be very careful. Scammers buy, sell, and trade names and numbers. They create organization names that sound similar to an official legitimate charity, trying to catch their targets off guard. And again, they're trying to prey on the target's vulnerabilities by working on their target's compassion. Be particularly cautious and on your toes for charity scams that pop up after crises or disasters. And scammers will want their target to make an on-the-spot decision, so there will be pressure to pay or donate quickly. Next slide, please. Using caller ID or an answering machine can be helpful in avoiding scams and charity calls. Don't answer calls from unfamiliar numbers. Again, if you are caught on the phone, just say no thanks and hang up. Make it a personal policy ahead of time that you don't make decisions about money based on a phone call or a first-time visit at the door. That allows you time to give some thought to it. And then do some research if it's a topic that interests you. Ask for your company material or their company materials. They likely don't exist. And then look to see if it's a legitimate charity by doing a search online. And if you're still caught on the phone, ask how much actually goes to the charity and how much goes to administration. And in the process, you may start becoming aware of more red flags. Again, just don't send money. Next slide, please. In a lottery scam, you've won money, a big trip, or maybe even an inheritance. But there's always a catch. There are fees involved that have to be paid in order to collect your prize. some of the signs this is a scam is that the person talking on the other side of the phone is really excited for you, and they just really are trying to build you up too. The amount of money they are offering may be very large, so small fees don't seem very big and kind of trivial in comparison to maybe what they are promising you. It's urgent that you act quickly to claim your prize, so you don't have time to think about it. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Again, here, fees of some kind will be required in some form, most likely through the wire transfer, the reloadable debit card, or the gift card. So don't send the money. Next slide, please. At the beginning of this presentation, Janae identified that identity theft was formerly the area with the largest number of complaints to the Federal Trade Commission. Now, 65% of the complaints to the FTC relate to telemarketing calls. I'm sure we've all had them. The call centers for these calls often generate from overseas, so they are out of the jurisdiction of our government to where they cannot regulate them. These call centers can make spoofed calls. And if you want to know what spoof calls are, they're rerouted so that they look like a local number. So scammers know that if it looks like a local number, their targets are more likely to answer those. And maybe you've even received calls from your own phone number, which is kind of eerie. But again, those calls most likely originate outside the company or the country. Some telemarketing calls give you the option to opt out of future calls. Don't even consider this option. By taking the steps to opt out, you're confirming that there's someone on the other side of that phone that they have called. And that is something they're hoping for, so that they can actually use that number to call your number again in the future, or maybe even sell your number to other telemarketers. And then telemarketing calls that are legal are those that are from political parties, charities, and reminders such as appointments that you have already made. So you might also check with your phone company to see if there are any call blocking options available for your phone, possibly some software for your devices. Next slide, please. Before we close, we wanted to cover online safety a bit. Please, please, please understand those items and things that make up your personal information. It's really important to know what not to share. Updates to software sometimes include fixes to apps and devices that help protect your personal security, so keep those updated. Any antivirus software that might be on your devices, keep those updated. Two-factor authentication is getting more common and more requested, especially with cash accounts. Those usually include a PIN number or a code for access to accounts, maybe a fingerprint or other security feature to access maybe those personal devices that we have, and some secure accounts. Often those codes are sent over text or email, so two-factor authentication is very good. One thing to really remember is please do not use public Wi-Fi when accessing personal accounts, such as at a hotel or a restaurant. Don't be using that when you're using a credit card, for a purchase other than maybe your restaurant meal, or making transactions that may involve other personal information. And if something isn't adding up, just don't do it. Next slide, please. Scams and identity theft are constantly changing, taking on a new look and a new cause every day. Bottom line, those that create the scenarios are hoping to gain information and resources that are not theirs, but yours. It's your identity and your assets, so do what you can to make them remain yours as much as possible. Next slide, please. We've listed a few resources here that we thought supported our presentation. The first section is related to the Federal Trade Commission. The ones that are listed here can be printed off as a PDF if you are interested in any of those. But just know there are numerous other resources on other topics related to scams and fraud and identity theft than those that are listed here, available through the Federal Trade Commission. The USA.gov site, it covers some telemarketing tips, even beyond the scams and frauds link that is listed here. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a good source for recognizing and preventing scams and fraud and the exploitation of older adults, especially if you do a search for older adults type of information. And then you could always go to the K-State Research and Extension Family site. You'll find different topics covering through articles on scams and credit by searching the word scams for that one. Next slide. Do we have questions for us from anyone in the chat or the Q&A?
Barbara, I'm not seeing any as of right now.
Okay. Well, thank you
Just
for
had
joining us
one come
today.
in, Barbara. I'm going to
All right.
interrupt you.
Go
We
ahead.
had in a little late. Can you re-identify the speakers in today's webinar? And I'm assuming where they are from was the question. We have Barbara Stockebrand. She is with the Southwind district. And we also had Janae McNally, who is with the Frontier district.
Thanks, Cassidy. Okay, if there are no other questions, I think that concludes our presentation.
Barbara, there was one comment in the chat box. Shakita commented, I have young adults find out that their parents and other family members use their social media accounts to open accounts such as utilities and others.
And
Very
another
loving family members. Do they not know that they are changing the whole economic creditability of their younger family members? Those younger family members will have a really hard task of clearing all of that out of there. That's an interesting concept.
Then there was another
also came in asking what can you do if somebody else has claimed my kids on their taxes?
I would guess you would have to go through the IRS on that somehow, and your best bet might be going to go through your own accountant to find where that best source would be to go through that. First of all, you need to make sure that whoever was filing the taxes had the legal right to include them as dependents. Tax law is not one of my strengths, but I would sure identify an accountant and then figure out where the IRS is, what section of the IRS would be to contact there. Yeah, I see the comment there from Chiquita about the young adults are told that they will need to take legal action against their family members. I'm guessing it could come to that for sure.
Okay, any other last minute questions? Okay, well, we would like to thank Barbara and Janae again for taking time to do this presentation for us. I'm sure many of you have learned something new and can take that home and practice. We do encourage you to complete the survey by using the QR code on the screen. There will be this will be sent to you right after and will be available also on the Living Well website. Feel free to provide any comments and suggestions. And lastly, if you'd like more information or additional resources, please reach out to your local extension agent. If you're not sure where your local office is, you can go and find it on ksre.kstate.edu. You'll be able to hover over your county and find the local location of your county office. And again, thank you, and everybody have a great rest of your afternoon.
Erin, could you advance to that last slide, please?
Yes. Oh, yeah,
There you
there's
go.
the QR code. Yes, that's where you would want to take the survey for today's presentation. It's also listed in the chat box as well.
I'll give it just a minute so people can
Yeah.
grab that code before I end our session today.
Oh, we forgot that we do have a drawing for a prize, a door prize. Sherilyn, are you going to do that?
I can do that real quickly. Give me 1 second. Okay, it's Dina Holler.
And we'll be in touch with you, Dina, to talk about distributing that door prize to you.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today.